Link star Nafisa Collier essentially questioned why Clark's Indiana Fever have so many TV dates while other teams, including the defending champions, have fewer. This came after the WNBA released its broadcast schedule, which revealed a jaw-dropping statistic. The Fever will have 41 of their 44 games aired nationally, setting a new record. I think it's kind of crazy that Indiana, especially with their free agents, will have the most nationally televised WNBA games this season. As we've seen, even before Caitlin Clark joined the WNBA, jealousy frequently rears its head when she achieves something big. In a segment that began as cordial as possible, Nafisa Collier essentially said, "It's crazy how much spotlight Clark is getting, a take that, as we'll see, is pretty bizarre considering some of her other comments in that same interview regarding the WNBA's growth. It's like she wants to have her cake and eat it too, benefit from Caitlin's star power, but also complain about it." Really happening here, and if you think Caitlin deserves all those national TV games, then go ahead and subscribe. Alright, so here's what happened. The WNBA schedule was released, and it turns out that the Indiana Fever's team is getting an unprecedented 41 out of 44 games on national TV, setting a new record. Anyone with a calculator or common sense can figure out why the league had more national TV games last year, because the Indiana Fever had 18 of the top 20 most viewed games. That's correct, in 2024, the Fever dominated the TV ratings, not just marginally ahead. They had the most watched games in the league, setting attendance records and representing a significant portion of the WNBA's overall viewership. In fact, Fever's games accounted for between 40 and 45% of the league's total TV viewership last season. To put it another way, one team led by a single superstar rookie attracted nearly half of the viewers to WNBA broadcasts. Clark's games averaged roughly 3 times as many viewers as other WNBA games, which is crazy but true. Naturally, the TV network said, "We want more of that." If millions of people watch Caitlin, you can bet those Fever games will be broadcast on ESPN, ABC, CBS, and any other platform, so more viewers translate into more ad revenue, which leaves network executives grinning. Caitlin is that player for the WNBA. She's the hot hand that can help everyone win by expanding the game's audience, but like a player pouting when they don't get the ball, some WNBA veterans are apparently pouting that Caitlin is getting so much attention. In theory, with the league's new CBA negotiations approaching, every WNBA player should want the league to put its best foot forward and maximize exposure. You'd think they'd all be cheering, so Nafisa Collier went on First Take and was asked about the question itself was a little off. It framed the situation as though the WNBA league office was choosing to favor one team, but that's not really how it works. The broadcast partners ESPN, ABC, CBS, and others make those decisions because they know which matchup will draw the most viewers and dollars. In other words, it wasn't the league playing favorites, rather was the TV networks making a business decision. The WNBA's broadcast schedule specifically asked whether it was fair for the Fever, with Caitlin, to have so many nationally televised games. Her team will have 41 of their 44 games televised, while the Liberty, the reigning champions, only have 32. The WNBA does not make these decisions unilaterally, and we are pushing the Fever and Caitlin Clark above everyone else. Their partners are saying that we want Caitlin Clark on the Fever because more people will watch and we can sell more advertising. But first, let's just say that the WNBA does not currently decide who is on TV. Instead, they work with the WNBA to get a certain number of games on specific days and so on. These networks choose who to show, and they will always pick the Fever. Any employee at any of these networks who did not select the Fever should be fired. That's right. How did Nafisa react? I think it's 2 things. First, obviously, people want to watch Caitlin play, so you have to put the people on TV that people want to see, but at the same time, there are stars throughout the league, and to put it that way, you want good basketball. Of course, Indiana, especially with their free agents, will be a great team, but I think it's kind of crazy that they're not playing the defending champions on TV. Now, Nafisa could have stopped there. The next part about getting good basketball on TV and how it's kind of crazy that the Liberty aren't getting more games raised eyebrows. Let's break that down. Yes, the New York Liberty won the championship last year and are an incredible team. They are scheduled to play 32 games on national television, which suggests that they should have more national exposure as champions, possibly even more than Caitlin's team. But let's play the match. Clark got 41 of 44 games on national television. To give the Liberty more than that, you would have to broadcast nearly all of their games nationwide. Nafisa is saying that the Liberty should have every game on national TV because that's the only way they'd surpass Caitlyn's count. While great accomplishments don't necessarily make you the biggest draw, entertainment value is different. Some teams and players are just more exciting to the general public, as evidenced by the ratings, which show that Caitlyn and the Fever were that team last season. With the off-season upgrades, they're expected to be even more electric this year. On the one hand, Nafisa acknowledges that you have to put on who people want to see Caitlyn, but in the same breath she balks at the outcome of that logic, which comes off as contradictory and, to be honest, rooted in ego or hurt feelings rather than facts. Almost immediately, fans and commentators picked up on this, and it generated a discussion about whether this pushback is about fairness or just feelings, because from a business standpoint it's clear that this is a business. And you want to know what Caitlyn Clark is good at. I don't know why it's so difficult for people to understand that, like, you guys make all this money but you don't know how to take care of good business. However, Stephen A. Smith, who never hesitates to stir things up, asked Collier to think about how the NBA handled Michael Jordan in his prime. Came along, he wasn't yet winning championships, but his popularity was so great that the NBA practically advertised everything they could about him. So why is that a problem when we've seen that this kind of marketing strategy has worked in the past? Bingo. Stephen A. framed it as a simple business question, and there's no doubt that the NBA leaned heavily on Jordan's popularity back in the day. That's just sports marketing 101. You'd think that Nafisa, who is not just a player but also a budding entrepreneur, would soon realize the value of riding a superstar's wave. Collier co-founded the NEF and knew that Caitlyn Clark would be a huge draw for viewers and help Unrivaled succeed, so she bet heavily on it herself. However, after Stephen A. Jordan's comment, Nafisa reaffirmed her position, saying, "I don't think it's an issue," adding, "I do think Ken's a star, and like I said, people want to see her, and we are trying to grow the league. Like, you need to put on TV the players that people want to see. But sort of what I said earlier, I don't think raising the level of the other teams has to mean bringing Caitlyn or the Indiana Fever down." The tone of Nefa's response suggested that she felt slighted on behalf of other teams, which struck a nerve because it seemed to ignore reality. Let's call it that way, because what's really driving this pushback is a sense of equity and ego rather than actual injustice. Collier's opinion that Caitlyn Clark is hogging the national TV slate is unfair and crazy. She doesn't mind that Caitlyn receives 41 games, but she thinks it's too much compared to everyone else. Theoretically, the WNBA and its broadcasters stand to gain a lot from heavily showcasing Caitlyn, but they ignore how the entertainment industry operates. If Nafisa Collier-owned Minnesota Lynx were guaranteed to attract millions of viewers each night, you can bet those networks would have quickly scheduled all 44 of their games on national TV. This isn't personal, it's business. There are only a limited number of broadcast slots that partners are willing to give the WNBA, so they will maximize them with the matchups that attract the most viewers. When Caitlyn Clark comes to town, several WNBA teams have moved their Fever games to much larger venues, sometimes 2 to 5 times the size of their usual arena, just to handle the ticket demand. They did this only for games against the Fever because they know those games will sell out, and then some. It's the same principle on TV. Collier's stance starts to look short-sighted here because she's so focused on everyone getting equal shine that she's missing the bigger picture, Caitlyn's spotlight. Actually, it shines on all players because Clark isn't playing alone in the world. Every time the Fever is on national TV, another team is right there with them, playing in front of a million or more viewers that they might not otherwise get. That's an opportunity for those players to gain notoriety and impress fans who tuned in for Caitlyn. The spotlight may be on Clark, but it also extends to her opponents. If you let it, this idea that the rest of the WNBA is being slighted seems counterintuitive to me, because the rest of the league is being boosted. I can't think of many ways to say that, but Nafisa Collier, despite her potential grievance, is a much bigger name now than she was around this time last year, and Collier's assumption that other teams play good basketball and would draw just as many if given the chance is flawed. It's not a criticism of other teams' quality. The WNBA has many great players and teams, but last season demonstrated that quality alone isn't what draws record audiences. If two great teams compete but one of them has a once-in-a-generation talent with a huge fan base, that game will draw far more casual viewers than, say, two equally solid teams without that marquee name. It may not be the most romantic reality, but it's a fact, so Nafisa Nafisa keeps bringing up quality basketball as though the Liberty or other teams are somehow being Collier's argument when diplomatically stated boils down to feelings over facts, which is why it's failing. The facts are crystal clear. In 2023, before Clark, WNBA viewership and attendance were on a slow, steady rise. Nothing too crazy happened, but in 2024 the league saw an explosion of interest unlike anything in recent memory. Attendance spiked in arenas across the country whenever the Fever came to town. Remember those arena upgrades for her games, and TV viewership was through the roof. By the end of the season, 22 WNBA games had exceeded 1 million viewers, a record not seen in more than 20 years, of which 19 were Fever games. The average broadcast for the Fever's regular season was roughly 1 million. It's amazing to think about this. In the WNBA playoffs, the deeper rounds, semifinal, finals typically garner the most attention. However, in 2024, Caitlin's Fever made it into the playoffs and played 2 first-round games, which drew more viewers than the actual WNBA Finals games. In fact, Clark's last playoff game, Game 2 of the first round, drew 2. The largest ever cable audience for a WNBA game was 5 million viewers, drew about 1 in the first game of the finals. The WNBA stars Brianna Stewart, Courtney Vander and Collier herself secured a TV deal with TNT and streaming on Max. Opening night viewership peaked at a respectable 364,000 viewers, a record for a women's game on that network. As the novelty wore off, many games drew far fewer eyeballs, and some broadcasts struggled to even crack 6 figures in viewers. If that doesn't tell you the kind of gravity Caitlin has, then venture unrivaled. Neff's own offseason provides us with another telling statistic. 221,000 viewers on TNT. True TV revealed that despite having many of the W's biggest names, the league didn't attract much attention. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't particularly noteworthy either. Now imagine if Caitlin Clark had played an unrivaled game. It's safe to assume that those numbers would have tripled based just on her name recognition alone. Collier and her partners undoubtedly believed that, so they were willing to pay Clark more than $1 million for a 3-month stint. However, Caitlin turned down the offer to concentrate on the WNBA because she is devoted to the league, and Neffa was aware of this, which is why her complaint about the Fever's TV time feels so contradictory with all of this evidence. It's difficult to see Collier's as anything but emotional. Earlier in that same First Take interview before the TV schedule talk, Nafisa Collier discussed the upcoming WNBA collective bargaining agreement. For background, the Players Union has opted out of the current CBA, meaning they'll renegotiate a new one soon. The timing is coincidental. They did it because of the surge in popularity the league experienced since, you guessed it, Caitlin arrived. The players see the league expanding and understandably want a new one. Bigger piece of the pie. Some players like Angel Ree, a former LSU star who is now a rookie in the WNBA, and Collier herself have even hinted that they might strike if they don't get what they think is fair in this new deal. That's a strong stance, and it has made many fans anxious. When pressed, Nafisa didn't back down 1 inch. I think we're in a great position because, as you guys have seen, the sport is just exploding. As you can see, the WNBA viewership last year was unmatched this year, so we have all the leverage we've ever had as players, and we have the most leverage we've ever had as WNBA players. Despite record audiences, the WNBA as a business is still finding its footing. Reports show the league operated at a loss of about $40 million in that very season of peak viewership. Yes, the most watched WNBA season ever, but it wasn't profitable enough to avoid 8-figure losses. So it was cute of Neffa to lump in unrivaled there as if it had massive ratings, but it didn't. Nice try. The real kicker was her saying players have all the leverage. When she talks about the WNBA losing money, it's not like the owners are swimming in profits. Instead, they're investing in growth in the hopes that the revenue will catch up to the popularity. One post summarized it this way: the WNBA just lost $40 million with the most viewers ever. What leverage is she referring to? There was the obvious irony: Collier championing rising viewership as a bargaining chip, then practically in the next breath complaining about the very phenomenal
phenomenon, Caitlyn's exposure, that caused those numbers to rise. Another YouTuber said, yes, use the leverage and then complain about the only player that attracts millions of viewers being on TV too much. This had to sting because it captures the contradiction in Neff's position. Neffa's comment is extremely important. She talks about how attendance and viewership have increased, but she carefully avoids explaining why she doesn't mention the Caitlin Clark factor at all, even though she knows it deep down. Unless you understand this player's unique draw, you wouldn't do that. Collier and every other WNBA player witnessed what happened in 2024 when Caitlin made the league the talk of the town. However, on the first take, Neffa spoke in general terms like, we've earned more because the league is growing. The truth is that the players are negotiating on the back of what Caitlin generated. I understand Nefisa's point of view, but in the end it does come across as ego and pride creeping in. The players collectively hope to benefit from that, which is fine because that's how it works. After all, no one wants to feel like their league is a one-woman show, and the WNBA can't survive long-term by focusing on just one player. However, the last time I checked, whenever the Fever plays on national TV, another team shares that stage. Those opponents are getting in front of huge audiences, many of whom may be first-time viewers who tuned in for Clark. That is invaluable exposure for everyone involved. Perhaps instead of complaining, players should seize the moment. If you're playing against Caitlin on a nationally televised night, make it count. Give the fans at home a casual look or something to remember you by, so they might stick around as WNBA fans even when Caitlin isn't on screen. In other words, turn those Caitlin casuals into true WNBA fans. The way it is, responses like these demonstrate that the WNBA literally lived off the charity of the NBA for 25 years. The WNBA is in a position where it will grow, and the only reason this league won't grow is because of the players and the traditional media. The truth is that Caitlin Clark is a phenomenon, and that she's presenting an opportunity that might only come around once in a generation, until the WNBA has a lot of goodwill and new interest right now. But if the public senses infighting or ungratefulness toward what's fueling the growth, they could be turned off entirely. If things go wrong, momentum is a delicate thing that can vanish quickly. Thank you for watching, and see you next time. The players start working as one unit, putting aside personal pride, acknowledging their position, and accepting who's driving this surge. These jealous-sounding actions based on feelings rather than facts will only alienate fans.